Good day, ball boys and girls. We are in fact back, and I so apologize that it's taken us this long to get back, but we are back, and that is because of some bombshell news that has happened, and that, I'm sure you're well aware, is John Herdman has left the Canadian national team and is now joining Toronto FC. So let's just jump right into it. This is the FC13 Podcast. Paul, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well, yeah. Simulating to the new environment pretty well. The time difference, I've missed the time difference up, ladies and gentlemen. I went even out an hour further away than we were initially. So recording, we're flying a little bit by the seat of our pants right now, but we're just about making it work. Like bombshell news like this kind of helps too. You know, like, all right, just keep it to one thing. We're going to focus on one thing because we got to talk about this, even if we are like a little bit late, but we couldn't let it slide.
We really couldn't. And we did. Now, keep in mind, if you haven't been keeping up with the FC13 podcast, we are a very scattered group, and we've managed to make ourselves just a little bit further away with Paul moving now truly to the West Coast. So we now actually have a West to East Coast kind of derby situation set up between everyone here in the FC13 podcast realm and 13th Man Sports. So it is a little bit harder timing wise to get everybody to kind of join in together. But because of that and this news, we are now getting a bit late. John Herdman has, in fact, left the Canadian national team and has joined Toronto FC. So let's sort of jump into it. And I mean, one of the biggest and most curtailing things is Canada got to the World Cup because of John Herdman. And that's an undeniable fact.
Yeah. Like when he got appointed back in 2018, I think it was, like the ambition was there. I think it came out and saying like the goal was to get to 2022, they wanted to get to the World Cup. They didn't want to wait to get in by default in 2026. And, you know, like with good reason, he probably was laughed at the time. Like I wasn't really around at the time to know for sure, but I imagine the prevailing thought was, that's all well and good, but like good luck with that.
Yeah,
I mean, he was coming from a position of experience and strength, I guess, and like with the women's team, like just knowing what it's like being at a World Cup, having that experience. He probably was really eager to go there again after had a relatively good experience in 2015, getting to the quarterfinals. But yeah, it's hard to imagine Canada getting to that World Cup without him being there. Like it's hard to picture somebody else being at the helm throughout that run, particularly in 2021. It just seemed like John Herdman was Canada at the time, which I mean, if you believe the rumors with the Nike deal, I guess he was.
Yeah, it really. I mean, any rumors are going to be. Canada fans are brutal for some of these rumors too. Like, again, that he's the reason why our Nike deals are all kind of shit. And I mean, like some of our rumors are insane, but it really was. It was his goal. He said it several times. It was his goal to get us to 2022. We didn't get him by default, but you are right. Like it was a laughed at idea. I mean, that's. If you take the job as a national team manager and the wording out of your mouth is not either get to the World Cup or win the World Cup, they're probably like, I don't think we hired the right person because that's your job.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of was like a good introduction to what kind of manager he would be. Like we've said it the whole time, it's kind of been like a sort of defining trait is that he's a motivator. He's a guy who goes in, unites the dressing room. There's that famous story of his first training session in Canada, and there was like multiple fights and sort of cliques throughout the camp. And you compare that to like what the camp was like by the time they qualified for the World Cup, and you just watch that documentary they put out last year ahead of the World Cup. You can see it's just a group of guys who really want to be there. They really want to be around each other. Again, like that doesn't happen without him there. Like that's his main skill is he got these guys together. Because you look on paper, like I'm gonna say on paper, like that team definitely should have got to the World Cup. But you look at how they were in 2019 and 2018, like I'm not sure if they were getting well coached enough to get to that point. I know these guys were a bit younger there as well too, but like if they didn't have someone like John Herdman there who has a sort of like motivating come together spirit, I don't know, maybe there's enough infighting there they don't get in, or like a couple of results go their way. Like because the start of the final round didn't get off to the great start. Didn't go off to a great start. A couple of draws in there. Like maybe if they had someone else that could have gotten away from them. We'll never know because Herdman obviously was there. They got in no problem. But that's been the defining thing, I guess, for his tenure. Like he was a motivator for them, like from the very beginning, and it carried through.
Yeah, he was a motivator. I mean, he pushed them through some of the harder times, and we benefited significantly from it, jumping from a 70-point ranking system to 33, I think was the highest that we got. Like that
was definitely like a top 35, 33, 34, something
which
like that.
which is incredible. And again, with all of these turmoils, because again, you have player conflicts and all this stuff, but then you have issues with our federation, and everyone does have issues with federations. We are not alone in this. I'm well aware. Some have way worse than we do sometimes, but then like jumping in with that too, and like a weird lofty goal, he was able to do a lot to really kind of turn it around and get some big results against some bigger teams in that qualifying, which in and of itself should be just enough to sort of cement him as a great manager, at least in Canadian national history. Because how do you go and win against the United States, which we had struggled to do for years, and then go again winning against Mexico, which again struggled for years? Like that is, anyone, even if we didn't qualify, you could hang your head high and say that's an impressive sort of run.
No one can take those away from, and it's not just like the 2 home wins as well. Like during the World Cup qualifying game, everything just sort of went right in that sense. Like they went to the Azteca, and they probably should have won in the Azteca. They went to Nashville, like massive stadium, like 75,000 or something it is like that. Again, they managed to get out of a draw. Like so, they're not only just like winning the games at home, they were getting results away from home as well, which is really solidifying it, because CONCACAF is like you're defined by your away results in CONCACAF because it is such a disparity geographically. Like it's one thing to beat a team at home, like any team can really beat any other team in their home thing. You've seen that throughout the final qualifying, like with some of the results you got. But it's like getting results away from home that's a true hallmark in CONCACAF of results. So I think obviously it was fantastic beating like Mexico at home and the USA at home. Those are results that like rightfully should never be forgotten. But like I think just as impressive is like getting results away from home as well. And I just feel like they're kind of like forgotten about just because they happened earlier on in the campaign. Maybe people weren't quite paying as much attention back then. Certainly not compared to when we got to the game in Edmonton and Hamilton. So I just wanted to give like those results their flowers as well, because it's really impressive to do. It's really impressive to go in there and get results also. Same as going into Honduras and El Salvador. Like Honduras has been a place where like Canadian soccer dreams have went to die.
So many times.
There was no Davies certainly wasn't in. Maybe Eustachio. I know Eustachio definitely didn't play against the USA in that window. He might have just been on the bench for that. So there's 2 big players who weren't playing in that game, so they were able to adapt and that such, like play other players there. So it's not as if it was just like it's easy to look on the outside and going, oh, Canada, they got Davies now. The same way as how Bale got Bale was playing for Wales. Like that's just a cheat code for them now. But like you still got to work with the other players there, and so like. I'm weirdly glad in a way that Davies didn't play for quite a bit of Canada's reign in the World Cup qualifying, just because like sort of cemented and legitimized that no, this is not just one guy. This is a team that Herdman's put together here.
Yeah, he's done a fantastic job of building and developing, and I mean, again, Canada was better for it. We got there. It is kind of a crappy scenario to sort of see him go. And I mean, the next sort of question then falls with all of this happening is sort of, why did we come, like, where did we come to this? Like, how did we come to this? And I know that question has been beaten to death. If you're interested in this sport, into this at all, you have watched videos, you've listened to podcasts, you've read articles. And again, how did it come to this? And there maybe isn't necessarily one set answer, but there are definitely tons of factors and little answers that easily point to why he did this. Canada's national team problems, right? TFC needing someone, the turmoil in there, and maybe what John Herdman's goal is, right?
It's a tricky one here because as great as like so Herdman's reign for me is kind of like almost divided in 2. There's the beginning of the reign and then up until like March 2022 when they qualified for the World Cup, where like nothing can go wrong, and it was almost as like the turmoil in the CSA was sort of paralleling his like John Herdman as the coach as well, because like we've seen obviously we got into the World Cup, things kind of became a bit apparent. Like I'm not saying that we all thought John Herdman was the second coming of Pep Guardiola or Carlo Ancelotti or something like that. Like we're not saying here he was like the best coach in the World Cup, but like we had high regards for him. Like it was a lot of people thinking out there, even myself, like maybe after this World Cup we're going to lose them to like a championship team in England or something. Like someone's going to come calling, like a Sunderland or a QPR or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, and so obviously the World Cup, it kind of shows up a little bit. Like we play Belgium, dominate the game, should have won, and then long ball over the top is what does Canada, which if you do your homework and you go over games that Canada played under John Herdman, men's and women, you'll find that they concede a lot of goals from a long ball over the top. So as good as a performance that was, you have to think that like if Coach Herdman was better at coaching his team defensively that doesn't go in, maybe he could have handled the penalty situation with Davies better. Like I personally didn't think much of it at the time, but maybe something with hindsight, maybe a stronger manager there would have put the ball into Vittoria's hands or David or someone else like that. And the Croatia game is the one that everyone looks back on though as like sort of like a turning point for Herdman. Like in the build up with the things he was saying about like we're gonna F Croatia here, gonna get monetized money. Like you don't need to light a fire under the team who finished second in the World Cup just 4 years beforehand. You don't need to light a fire under a team who has probably the best midfield three in the tournament, and Kovacic, Robic, and Modric. Like you don't need to give these guys any more motivation than we did, especially people in Eastern Europe take things very personally. So like you didn't need to fire these guys up anymore. And I mean the biggest mistake for me still was like it's also his biggest strength, I guess, is loyalty and his motivation and stuff. Like he was loyal almost to a fault, and like I think the perfect example of that was playing a 39-year-old Atiba Hutchinson in that midfield just off like 3 days rest of playing against Belgium.
I think you're entirely right. It was a weird choice. I mean, the turmoil definitely is going to have an effect. I mean, if his goal was to, at the end of the day, we don't know. Like if his goal too was just to get them to the World Cup, like that was, and he's achieved that, and he's thinking, okay, well maybe I haven't, like maybe this is my highlight, maybe this is my ceiling. You know, he's going out on a high road. He's taking the high road. He's thinking, okay, I got them there. I struggled in the World Cup. Like we got them there, but I struggled in the World Cup, got his monetization money from saying those words. We bowed out, and he's thinking, okay, well, you know what? Maybe this has always been in the back of his head since we finished at the World Cup. Maybe this is like, okay, well, I've kind of done all I can do. Maybe it's time to like, you know, jump ship, not necessarily jump ship, but like kind of move on while I have this high road where I've got this success under my belt.
What I would say is I feel like his stock would have been the highest after the World Cup because Canada did play well. Like outside looking in, people seeing he did well for Canada. We're just like, obviously, like Canada were never realistically going to like do much of this World Cup here. We're just looking at that Belgium and Croatia game. We shoulda, coulda, woulda. But like in that sense, like championship teams, like I said, or even League One, if we want to say League One, like they sack managers all the time in England, which is where he's from. It would have been an easy in for him if he's feeling homesick. There was also that like weird rumor as well in January about like the New Zealand were interested in him.
Yeah,
so I think they're like, if he really wanted to, I think he could have resigned like after the World Cup to maximize his stock because I feel like between like the games Canada played in 2023, I don't think he helped himself. Like particularly in the summer. Yeah. I think in the summer is when like a lot more people are starting to get more fed up with him with how the Nations League went, and like I've said it before, I'll say it again. Like I don't buy the excuse of the squad we brought to the Gold Cup. I thought we should have done a lot better at the Gold Cup regardless. So I'm thinking based on how the summer went, and you're hearing things about how there's not as much harmony in the squad right now. Like the players are starting to get a little bit like fed up with him tactically. Like I'm wondering if it's more of a case of he's decided to walk before he's pushed at this point. Like because I don't think he was ever going to get fired. But in terms of like his own stock, I think he has to think about his own future as well. Like he could easily just stay there in Canada until like say 2026 whenever his contract's up. But like if Canada haven't really improved under him, there's nowhere really to go there. So I think he's had to take a calculated gamble. He's taking Canada as far as he can go, which there's no shame in that. There's no shame to say that the Canada squad now has outgrown him. Like, that's a good thing. Like, it's a good thing that he's brought them to that point, if you know what I mean, that they've outgrown him. And he's clearly has, like, and he has this option to go to Toronto FC, which he decided to do, give himself a new challenge. It works out great for the CSA, I guess, as well, because they don't have to pay to fire him. They just have to pay to somehow replace him. So, yeah, it ended kind of on a sour note, but like, and as sweet as it possibly could. Does that make sense?
I think you were entirely right. He might have taken a calculated risk, but that calculated risk, despite the, I don't want to say significant failings, but despite the problems we had with our games and the tournaments that we had, nobody really pays the same attention. So he's still going out while the stock is still high. Notice those issues, went, you know what? Maybe it is time. Let's move on. Let's give someone else. Let's take this, because he is now Toronto FC's new coach. Now, while he is the new coach, technically, he is not starting until October the 1st is going to be the official first day, which means our season's done. Toronto is not pulling this around and going into the playoffs. Let's be totally honest. We just had our first win in an awful amount of games, and that's not going to go anywhere. But what we have heard, and this is a report from the Globe and Mail, that, and I'm going to read this so that way I don't, butcher it or someone comes back and says anything. Manning had texted Herdman directly after, and this is after, the circle around Herdman had reached out directly to Bill Manning, to which Manning had replied back, would he really be interested? Did so. They set up a meeting and things transpired from there. So because of that meeting, he is now the new manager of TFC.
And that goes back to what we're saying there. Like, I think he might have seen the writing on the wall that he has to leave before things get worse. Like, I'm going off rumors and he said and she says, but they're coming from like somewhat known articles, like the Athletic, for example. I'm saying that like one of these players who's a bit fed up with him is Davies, which honestly I'm not really surprised with. I feel like Herdman never quite knew what to do with Davies.
Yeah,
it's like someone who's it would be like someone who drives just has an e-bike, being given a Ferrari at times, which is not, again, I don't mean to say it's a criticism of John Herdman. It's just that like Davies is used to working with like a higher caliber of coach, and we could see that on the field that like there was a lot of times where Davies was out there playing hero ball. He was a bit like undisciplined positionally, whereas you see him in Bayern Munich, he's a lot more disciplined. He could play him at left back, and he doesn't want to play at left back. He said he wants to play further up, which Herdman's allowed him to do, but like maybe also too much.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think Davies and maybe some of the more higher profile guys are starting to realise that like they need a high level of coach. Herdman doesn't want to be there as a lame duck with half the squad falling out of him. So like it makes sense to go now before things get any worse. I mean, I don't think there were like ever a tipping point or a boiling point or anything, but like it means we're not going to get to that scenario as well, which is good. We don't need like players like, I don't know, refusing to play for the national team or like being dropped from the national team to make a point. We don't have a big enough depth for that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, we don't. And it makes sense to sort of jump in. Toronto FC's got the budget. They've got the younger players that he's familiar with, right? So this isn't just a thing about, oh, well, someone's free and they can take him. He's familiar with the grounds. He's familiar with the academies because a lot of the people have come there, to play for him through these academies. He's got that familiarity, so he can jump into a struggling team, an environment he's familiar with, struggling, and see if he can turn it around. So the whole thing works. It does make sense. Is it a good thing for TFC?
Yeah, here's the thing. I feel like I can envision this going one of two ways. Like we said, his main thing is motivating, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a team that's basically like at the ground zero, basically, and he's lifted up, like, oddly similar circumstances to Canada, where you got players fighting on the training ground, and like there's nowhere to go but up, and they play most of their games at BMO, like very, very similar sounding, isn't it? So like, there's one of two ways. I can see Herdman having like somewhat of an immediate impact with this squad. If anything, in that sense, I feel like giving him a whole pre-season might be a bit detrimental in that sense, as opposed to just getting in and having to deal with things straight away. But I guess it gives him a chance to like assess and go for his own players, because the other side is this is a guy who's actually like never really coached at a club level before. He's worked his way through the development squads in New Zealand, coaching New Zealand women's team, the Canadian women's team, and then the Canadian men's national team. It's almost an entirely different profession. National team, it's kind of part-time. You spend most of your time just like going to grounds, watching players who you might want to get in the squad, talk to dual nationals. It's very much more hands-off.
Yeah.
When you're a club manager, you're there every single day. You have to live and breathe it. There's no off switch. And so you wonder if the Canadian men's national team like eventually get like fed up of like Herdman shtick, like is that accelerated at club level where like you're seeing him every day? I'm not too sure. I'm also not too sure how transfers are gonna work. Like I said, this is a guy he's never had to bid for a player before.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's hard to predict, but like, I feel like it's gonna my gut's telling me it's gonna like work really well initially, but I'm just worried about what happens when we get to sort of like maybe like a midpoint in the season or the latter part of the season. Particularly if things aren't particularly going well, I'm not sure if he's the type of guy whose skills are best set to a team that's like middling or kind of like just about struggling. He seems like a guy who like thrives best when there's like a good ethos around the squad. So if that's gone, I'd be a little bit worried about him at TFC because I don't know where to go from there if it didn't work out. So this has to work out for him. I don't know what happens if it doesn't.
I mean, that's a blanket statement, but to counter some of those arguments, I think one of the benefits of him coming in when he has, right, and given the time that he has, that he's not starting up, because we're bottom of the table. We're not pushing for playoffs. There's no real impact he can make. That gives him months to watch how the team plays, get to know the dynamic, get to know the players. And I think the problem that was actually kind of thriving in the issues before is he was given these players who are from 25 different teams, from 25 different play styles, 25 different coaches, 25 different ways of thinking, and he has to then combine them. And they're moving up and on despite his say. He's just got to bring them together. So where Davies might have been like, oh, great, working with him, no problem, loving this, and then goes to Bayern and is like, oh, this is my specialty now. And he's like, well, I've not been playing you that for years. I think this is the perfect opportunity, being there day in, day out. He can be like, let's work together. I can see you thriving in this position where, I can only watch so much of your games and how you're doing. And I'm not talking to your coach at Bayern. I don't know what's sort of working. I'm not getting that. I'm only kind of going on what I can when you show up in these training camps. So I think this might be the opportunity where that's going to really benefit him in this scenario. It may not, and I may eat every single word I just said, and we may completely implode, but we're already rock bottom. So with no promotion relegation, we literally cannot get worse. There is no downfall right now to bringing him on.
Be interesting to see what happens if, like, say, some younger, promising Toronto players, I don't know, like Kobe Franklin or something, start getting linked with moves in Europe, because John Herdman's famously was saying when he was a candidate, like, at any given opportunity, I want these players out of MLS as soon as possible and into Europe. So wondering what his thoughts on that are going to be when he's an MLS manager.
I think he may not be sort of dragging those players back in, but I wonder if he's going to try to take advantage of his knowledge of some Canadian players and some smaller guys, because there are a lot of Canadian players that would truly thrive in MLS, maybe from the CPL or vice versa. It's hard to say because Toronto's does have a great academy. They've got a really good structure. They have a lot of money. And I think now, instead of the call-up system, where he's got to rely on, do they want to play for us? Do they want to play for me? Are they injured? Now having access to clearly a very big budget. Does he take advantage of it? Does he start going on a shopping spree? Does he start, using his contacts with, I'm sure Davies and him maybe got in a rift, but aren't dead set on ending. Does he use his contacts with them and with, Jonathan David and Eustachio to start maybe bringing players in on loan, or bringing players in that traditionally wouldn't visit these articles, but he's able to reach out directly to some of these directors and managers and kind of influence that. So I wonder if that's maybe going to come and aid him in the signing period. But
that's the fun part. We have literally no idea, like absolutely no idea what it's going to be like. I can very much envision him as a guy who's like going to be great for young players, for example. But like, I mean, if he turns around and just becomes like Jose Mourinho, like wheeling and dealing every player, and then like he tries to turn Toronto FC into Chelsea, like again, like you can't say you're surprised because like you had no precedent for it. Like we're going to be in truly uncharted territory with this guy. The only comparison I can think of is Luis Felipe Scolari, a guy who was like Brazil manager for a really long time, and then Portugal manager for a really long time. Like, I can't remember if he'd never been a club manager or not, but he definitely like defined himself as an international manager.
Yeah.
He moves to Chelsea and it doesn't work. And I crashed and burned after 6 months, but that was like so long ago and such a different scenario there. Like the amount of money you can play with, even back in 2008 for Chelsea, was astronomical. So like, it's not really comparable. That was the only thing I can think of, like something like this happening before. It's really unusual for a manager to like make their name internationally, like for so long in their career at this point. He's been managing for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was 5 years with the men's national team, 7 years with the women's national team, and if I'm not mistaken, 5 years with the New Zealand women's national team. And so that's a long fucking time.
Yeah.
A very, very long time. And you know what? It is as a TFC fan, this is a completely biased opinion. To me, great move for TFC. Whether or not the national team, whether or not John Herdman, TFC made a brilliant move. They signed a proven manager. Bob Bradley has been shit. He's been shit for a long time. He is not a good manager. I've said it clearly on a podcast several times. I knew it was going to do awful. We don't know what John Herdman is going to do, and we are at rock bottom. And I thought initially it was weird to sort of keep him on the sidelines, but I think now he's going to scope it out, and he's going to go in with a plan of attack instead of, I'm going to go in, and everyone's going to do what I tell them. He's going to go in and be like, okay, I see what's working. I see what's not working. Let's try and figure this out for next year and salvage something, next year. Because
gonna sell those season tickets.
Like they got to make some money. I mean, as long as Bill Manning is there, we are always in a bad position because it's just how it is. So we will see. I mean, he's done so much for the national teams and so long. He's left a significant legacy, you could say, and kind of really, if you think about it, what kind of legacy kind of has he left with the national teams? I mean, we felt it with the women's, but what do you think we're really going to feel with the men's side?
I think it's going to be looked on like very well, the same way people look at, say, Tony Waiter's time when he was Canada manager in the 80s. Like he's going to be in the now. There is a little bit of a sort of sense of missed opportunity about it, like with the summer being just so recent there. Like I really feel like we should have won at least one trophy there, like between the Nations League and the Gold Cup. But like I said, and the main thing is going to be like putting Canada on the world map, essentially. Like that's what it's going to be remembered for. Those wins against the USA twice, Mexico, playing Belgium as well as he did. Like getting Canada's first ever goals in a World Cup, and the sense of belief. Like you got to just. It's almost hard to imagine what like Canadian soccer was like 5 years ago compared to what it is now. Like we think it's in a bad place now. Just 2018 was somehow worse, and so his kind of coined
saying 2018 we are going to be in the World Cup. You'd just be laughed at. Like it didn't matter. You would just be straight up like laughed at.
So yeah, it's one of these like right now. Could have gone like right now. It's like so the legacy for me is could have gone better. But like if you had to ask me like 10 years time, say something like that, like when you have benefit the hindsight and like when you look back on like players and managers 10 years, really sort of tend to concentrate on the highlights, the things that you remember that made you happy. Yeah. And there'd be a lot of things there with John Herdman where that's the case, where he made you happy, like he made you excited for international windows as a Canada fan, which wasn't really a thing beforehand. So I'm not going to be contrary or anything and say like I wasn't a good manager, I was a hacker, all that, because like, I don't believe that. But I do believe that he's going to be looked back on fondly. And like I said, I might be a bit pessimistic about the appointment to Toronto FC, but like I genuinely hope it works out for him.
Yeah, And I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, a lot of people are, why is he left and why is Toronto poaching him? And we, just as we discussed, there are so many avenues that he could think, maybe I have reached my own personal ceiling with this team and I may only bring them down. My performances got us to the World Cup, got us some great wins, some great performances at the World Cup, even though, no, we didn't achieve a win where we maybe should have. But when these other teams, we play them for the Nations League, and you might think, okay, I've reached my ceiling with this right now, and maybe we could go up. But right now, I think I've reached my ceiling. At that point, a good manager is going to take that opportunity. A bad one who just wants that money is going to say, no, I'm going to stay put. My contract's still this. I don't care. We're going to do it. We could lose these players who don't want to play for us anymore. Yeah, they can't maybe play for another team, but they could be like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to play. And that would be even more of a detriment. So he's left on the highest note Canada's had in 36 years. So as a legacy that stands, he built up the women's team. They did so well. And Ben Priestman, again, took over and did phenomenal. Again, kind of having the same sort of struggle now. He built up the men's team, did something that we all thought was just a joke, like a total joke, until it suddenly, that joke became, oh, he was serious. Oh, he's actually doing it. And he got us there. And I think that kind of a legacy is a great one to end on. And I can't see it being anything less than that sort of ending. So we'll see what kind of legacy he leaves at TFC. I mean, the bar is set fucking low, real low. And it's been set low for several managers. So who's to say he doesn't blow it out of the water and absolutely crush it in his first year with TFC, and then say, gets some sort of offer somewhere up and leave somewhere better, and go somewhere to a bigger team overseas. Who knows? But I think it's undeniable the impact he had on the men's national team, on the women's national team, and at the very least should absolutely leave. He has, like, with his head held high and everyone knowing, he has won Canada silverware. Maybe not the men's, but he's won with the women's. He has won Canada silverware, and that is something to be proud of, period. So
yeah, could have wrapped up better myself.
Yeah. So with that, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're enjoying our random special YouTube style. We do apologize. We haven't been doing as many of these. Like I said, it has been absolutely chaotic, with Paul now being very much on the West Coast, all of us having various things going on, and Michael having his wedding, which, congratulations, Michael. We really do want to say that we love you so much. We're excited to have you back on when everything is all said and done. We are very much sorry for not having the most consistent schedule, and that will be fixed in the near future, I promise. Thank you guys so much for joining us now. And again, remember, listening and watching the FC13 podcast is a lot like watching football through a microwave.